So for every one detransitioner you talk to, you need to talk to 100 trans people who did not detransition in order to get an accurate reading of the satisfaction. And that's what they did. That's what these studies did.
Mathematically, you're going to eventually, over time, that population's going to grow, and it's going to,
That's
yeah,
fewer that's fewer than the number of people who regret their knee surgery. Should we stop doing knee replacement surgery? Should we stop that?
no, I don't think so. No,
Okay,
but I
so
think that,
then you understand then why you cannot use that as a basis of your argument for taking these treatments away from trans people. How are you tonight, sir? How would you like me to address you, sir, ma'am,
Sir,
sir? And then what is your name?
Leviathan.
Leviathan. All right. Well, nice to meet you, Leviathan. And you showed up in my chat. The specific wording you used was, let me see. I don't support trans. And then I invited you on just to have a little discussion about it. So, what are your thoughts? Like, why do you say you don't support trans? What's up?
Well, support what exactly, right? Because the question is, like,
Well,
do I?
you said support. You said you don't support trans. So, what did you mean by that?
That just means that I don't support like the activism and all that type of stuff.
What kind of activism? Like what?
Like, the type of stuff that they do when it comes to like, pushing the stuff in classrooms and like trying to get kids to transition and shit.
Do you think who's trying to get kids to transition?
The medical industry,
Why would they do that?
because they make a lot of money off of the prescription drugs, like they did with like the opiates. They killed off a bunch of people. They've shit. I don't know if they've shifted, but it's like the same premise basically. You got people pushing all these like hormones and stuff now.
Is trans healthcare killing a bunch of people? Because I've heard it's doing the opposite.
I think it depends on how you look at the question, right? Is it killing people? Like, are there people who are dying from taking hormones? I'm not sure about that, but what I do know is that there are people, the transgenders, they often kill themselves. I think their suicide rate is around 43%, even after transitioning. And so, what I think that's due to is the fact that eventually they realize that no amount of drugs is going to make them whatever gender it is that they're trying to be, and so that they eventually commit suicide, which is sad because if all that they had to be told was like, look, you can't change your gender,
So
and that could have saved them a lot of trouble.
so a couple of things real quick. The 40, I'm pretty sure it's 41%, but I'm willing to lend you 43. It's not, it doesn't make a difference. The 43% that you brought up is people who attempt, right? Trans people who attempt to take their lives. The actual success rate, I'm not sure of, but that's just to clarify, that is attempt rate, not successful attempt rate. And studies have been done on that phenomenon. And from what I've seen, at least, all of the studies end up concluding that when trans people are affirmed, not only by the healthcare industry, by their doctors and such, but also by the people around them, that would be their family, their friends, they actually goes down. I've heard by a rate of like, it'll be like 1/17th of what it was before. Like it's pretty similar to their non-trans peers or cis peers, as we say. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I don't know. That's the first time I've heard of that, so I can't really say. I just kind of have my own eyes and observe what I've seen lately, and it just seems like um, what I'm witnessing is kind of like I don't think that I don't know if they're turning people trans and stuff, but I feel like there's maybe certain types of people that are usually more predisposed to becoming trans, such as like the incel community. Because if you look at the incel community, it seems like there's a lot of these guys who are kind of weird, and they eventually say, "Oh, I'm a woman now." And I think it's because of kind of like a fetish that they have. I found out about this thing recently called autogynephilia, or usually abbreviated to AGP. And it turns out that a lot of trans people are actually autogynephiles. They get turned on by putting on dresses and stuff, and it mostly comes down to like a fetish thing that evolved out of the incel community. I would say that's probably the majority of the transgenders, and then there's like a smaller percentage that are actually people who have like the mental belief that they are in fact trapped in the wrong body. But that's a much smaller percentage.
Okay, I don't think there is any data supporting the autogynephilia aspect of this, but let's say for the sake of the argument that what you said is true, that there are just people who dress up as, there are men who dress up as women or consider themselves trans women because they are turned on by it, right? Because that's just their kink, whatever. Um, I guess even if that were the case, I don't know how you would be able to extract that's their actual purpose. Like, how can you tell the difference between somebody who's doing that and just like, like you said, you have admitted that there are genuinely people who feel that they are the opposite sex they were assigned at birth. So how would you be able to tell the difference?
That's a good question. I think you would have to do extensive kind of psychological evaluations before saying, okay, well, we're going to give you these drugs or we're going to perform this surgery. I think that would be a safer way. It's probably not foolproof, but that's one way to kind of keep it in check.
Well, yeah, but like, let's just say you're out in public and somebody says, "Oh, I'm a trans woman." Like you just happen to be talking to somebody and they're like, "Yeah, I'm a trans woman." Would there like be any way of knowing whether this person is autogynephilic?
And I guess unless I ask them questions that would, I don't know. What am
Right,
I?
and you can understand that it would probably be a weird question to ask, right?
Yeah, but that's a
Yeah,
question that medical professionals can ask and determine, right?
yeah. I mean, if they feel that's necessary, but from what I've seen in the clinical research and the clinical treatment of, what is it, gender dysphoria and gender affirmation, I've never seen it necessary for that question to come up. Like people, I don't know, like people do all kinds of people have all kinds of fetishes. So like foot fetishism, right? It's the like primary non what is it called? Like it's the most popular fetish that's not directly inherently linked to sex, right? So would you then say like people who go around barefoot are exposing their fetish to other people in public?
I think the problem with that comparison is that foot fetishists are not a political bloc. So,
Well, trans people aren't by default either. They're just people.
yeah, but they are involved in pushing a political agenda, I guess,
What's
or
that?
however you want to phrase it.
Well, what's that agenda though? Like, what do they
Well, that
want?
agenda is, well, it's like when you say, for instance, trans rights activists, for example, right? That those people are activists. They're pushing a certain political agenda.
Which
Is that not
is
right?
Well, yeah, sure, but what's their agenda is my question. Because you can say a lot of things are political. Wanting to feed children actually is political, but I wouldn't sit here and discredit people who want to feed children like on the basis that it's a political movement, right?
Okay. When I've asked this question, different people have told me different things. So, I guess that there will be people that are trans rights activists that'll say that their motivation is to, uh, I don't know, what is it? I mean, it's never really defined for me clearly. It's like it always seems kind of like an abstract thing. I haven't heard direct goals of theirs in mind. Maybe you can answer that for me.
Sure, and I do want to point out just real quick, like for somebody who is against trans, I don't want to put anything words in your mouth, but it does seem like you have a distaste for at least trans activism. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that's correct.
Right. So I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but I would like to point out that you are asking me to clarify what their overall goals are, while at the same time telling me that you have a distaste for trans rights activists. I just don't know how you have. I don't know how one person can have those two in their head at the same time.
Sure, because I've seen the way that they treat people in public, not just online. Online's always going to be a shit show on Twitter, especially. But if you can look up those videos online where they hold demonstrations and assault elderly women, calling them TERFs and such, right? I mean, it's I think that there's ample evidence out there that they are that some a good. I don't know about what number of them, but the ones that I've
Oh,
seen in videos and assaulting people at public rallies, I think that
oh, there are
there is.
there are some horrible trans people out there. I have no doubts about that. I've seen videos where I disagree with what the person is doing, and the person happens to be trans. But are there not videos of any demographic doing that? Like there's white people, black people, cis, trans, gay, straight, lesbian, Asian,
Yeah,
children,
well,
adults,
it,
like everybody can be an asshole.
my objection to it was on the basis of it being a political movement or inserting itself into political discourse. And so when I see the people that claim to represent that political movement out there, like assaulting elderly women, I think that that's a problem. Yeah.
Well, but again, like I guess my answer to that would be anybody can do that. Like anybody from any demographic. So just because you are trans does not necessarily mean you are representing the entirety of the trans movement. You just happen. It'd be like during the civil rights movement, there were black people. Just because you were black doesn't mean you were part of the civil rights movement back then. I certainly wouldn't consider somebody like Blair White, for instance, to be part of the trans movement by any stretch. Just because you are a part of the demographic doesn't mean you represent the movement. So, but even if you do, by the way, people of representing any kind of political movement can do bad things, and you can call out those bad things. I don't think you will find a single person, a single trans rights activist who says, "Yes, we should be assaulting people." I just don't think that that happens.
I don't know. See, that I would quibble with because I've seen that. I don't know how representative this is of everyday life, but you see people say like "kill all TERFs" on Twitter, and it has like 100,000 likes. I don't know if that's all bots or if that's all people that agree with that sentiment, but it is out there.
Well, there are certainly people who say that, and I think that's very inflammatory and not necessary. But you also have to consider these are people whose very existence is being threatened by TERFs and by the far right movement going on that's being enabled by Elon Musk, the richest man on the planet, by the way, who now owns the most popular social media site on the planet, and is just openly endorsing these really harmful ideas, not only about trans people but about like other minorities. I've seen him post all kinds of like what this is very interesting in response to like black people assaulting others, uh openly endorsing posts from Matt Walsh and Tim Pool and stuff. So you can understand, I would hope, why that tension exists and why uh inexperienced actors would jump to such extreme statements, right?
Yeah, but listen to what you introduced a lot more there, right? Elon Musk, black people. Well, black
Well,
people don't have anything to do with this
Well,
topic, I guess,
Elon
but
Musk
we.
has. Well, we can forget about that part if you'd like. Elon Musk, like I said, that all flows together because when you have the most powerful, I would say one of the most powerful men on the planet, who owns the most powerful social media site on the planet, saying you should or endorsing, at least I should say, people who say trans people should not exist. Like you as a trans person, a trans person should not exist. You are an anomaly, you're a freak of nature, you're this and that. I think that would make me pretty upset. I'm not a trans person, but I have trans friends and I'm upset in their stead. I think it's gross, I think it's disgusting, and I think that, I don't think that they should be saying I want to kill people, but I can certainly understand why many would jump there, why they get that upset.
That yeah, but that's not a justification. But I take it from the
I
fact that
never said it was. I am not in favor of
okay,
killing
yeah,
people.
yeah,
It's a bad
I'm
thing.
not saying you endorse it. I'm
Sure,
just
sure.
but you also you bring up like I'm guessing because you bring up Elon Musk and you say he's the most powerful man and the richest man. You're like more of like the kind of like more of the, like the lefty kind of people that are like that's just what I'm gathering from your from the way you explain it because there's different kinds of lefties. So you're like more of like the Biden kind, right? You're like, oh, we hate Elon and we love AOC and all that type of stuff. Is that correct?
Well, I did vote for Biden. Dark Brandon is rising, and we will all have to bow down to his superior reign. And one day I will have to take the forced feminization pills, but not today. Um, I will, when the time comes, submit to my Lord and Savior, Joe Brandon.
Well, I mean, at least you admit it. I know you're just joking, but
In all honesty, I am not a super Biden fan. I think that he is a limp dick Democrat. I think that Bernie should have gotten the nomination and hopefully beaten Trump. I think that he definitely could have. I'm a socialist.
oh,
I
okay. So
consider
you're like
myself
you're one of those
farther
guys.
left than your like establishment Democrat. Let's say
Yeah,
that.
you're one of those guys who takes a look at what Biden's doing, and you're like, yeah, he sucks because he's not like 10 times worse,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I exactly. He should be transing people even 10 times faster than he is.
Okay, that's a
Absolutely.
little. I think that's C. Well, that's a bit silly. I think you can admit that we shouldn't be transing everybody,
I
unless that
that's
is the agenda.
I was just kidding, but my point is correct. You are correct. Yes, I do think that he should be doing more of the things that he's, first of all, keep his promises and say, yeah, there's gonna be a public option, but also like, where is he when all these anti-trans bills are going into effect? Like, what is going on? He said, trans community, I have your back. Where is he? Like, I would like to see him out fighting like people like Ron DeSantis in Florida. Like, it doesn't make any sense. You say that you have the trans community's back, and yet where are you at?
Well, what is okay? See, now I'm glad we're back to that main topic because I'm trying to figure out what that. Okay, what does that mean though? Like, what does him saying that mean, right? And when you bring up, for instance, Ron DeSantis in Florida, what are you objecting to? Because I've looked at the bill that people were freaking out about, and some of it just seemed kind of like, I mean, fairly innocuous. Just maybe you can tell me what you take issue with.
Sure. Let's start with what Joe Biden means by "I have your back," because I don't know. Personally, I don't know. Because if he means what he says, he's sure not showing it. So when he says "I got your back," I think it's just all talk. I think that it's good to have. I think what I will say is it is good to have an openly pro-trans president. That is good in itself. I think that that is productive. I think that it's great that we've reached that point. But you've still got to put your money where your mouth is. You still have to be willing to go out and fight these terrible, and I mean terrible, anti-trans legislation. I'm pretty sure I haven't looked to get to your question about Ron DeSantis. I haven't looked specifically at his latest bills or anything, but I do remember the "Don't Say Gay" bill had some stipulations on you can't teach children under third grade that gay people even exist. Like, you can't talk about gay people at all, and I think that's crazy. I think that's insane.
Okay, I
I
mean,
Yeah.
maybe within the context of a biology lesson, maybe they could mention that. But I think that, well, I mean, look, I've seen, for instance, in I think it was in Michigan, where there's a big Muslim community. There was like a big parent-teacher association uproar over the fact that they were basically they had like some kind of very pornographic books in some kind of school or something. I don't remember exactly, but then I looked at it. I was like, oh yeah, this is a little bit overboard, you know. So I think some of that stuff is because it's like what do third graders need to learn about butt sex for, right? That doesn't really make sense.
Well, as far as I know, there's no curriculum that teaches third graders butt sex, but I would be interested in seeing that if that's the case and then analyzing it. But so far, all I've heard is conjecture. Like, they're teaching our kids this and that, and it's like I learned sex. I learned what sex is and like what the my personal anatomy does when I was in fourth grade, and I think that's appropriate. I also think
Mhm.
it's appropriate to teach children even as young as like kindergarten and first grade that, like, hey, there are people out there that want to touch your junk, and you should probably tell them to stop, even if it's people you know, especially if it's
Yeah,
people you know, because the people you know
sure.
are going to tell you it's fine, and they're going to get you to trust them, and you're not like you need to know that stuff, right? And
Yeah, but
I'm
I don't think
worried.
that that's the
Well, just real
controversial.
quick. Well, no, it's not. But well, it kind of is. There are conservatives I've argued with personally who say that no, we shouldn't teach anything about sex to kids, like, and anything at all. And I just don't agree with that.
I think it depends on what you mean specifically when you
Of
say that.
course.
But I mean, I would kind of agree because I look at some of these other nations on Earth, and like China's training like fucking little baby geniuses and little super soldiers and stuff. And it's like in America, we're like talking about pronouns in like kindergartens or whatever. I don't get, doesn't make much sense to me, but
Well,
okay.
pronouns are pronouns not just part of English curriculum?
It's kind of, it just seems like a waste of time teaching kids. I mean, I have a big problems with the American education system. I think that
What?
it's very
Say
stupid.
that one more time.
I said that I have
Okay, I'm going to
problems.
stop you right there because you just used a pronoun. So what's
What's
up with
that?
that? Well, you said that
No,
you said
no, that's what is the no, 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 no.
well, you
I'm.
did.
You're talking. We're talking about the.
You
You know what?
used
You know
another
what
one.
I'm.
Wait, you just used
You
another
know.
one. You said we. That's a
But
pronoun.
you know what we're referring to is like the
You
gender
said we
pronoun
again. You
stuff.
keep using pronouns. What is it with this woke shit? I'm
Okay.
fucking with you, but you get my point, right? Like, pronouns are an important part of the English language, and it's, I think it's silly that like we've taken this line that like pronouns are bad, or like saying, oh yeah, that person goes by he/him. Okay, now we're talking about the equivalent of raping children. Like, what's the deal? Like, I don't understand.
I never said no. I
Oh,
never made that
I
connection, but
sorry, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I have heard like people say, "Oh, we're grooming children by teaching them pronouns."
no, that's stupid. I think that,
Okay,
that is okay. Just because that there are people who say stupid shit like that, that doesn't mean
sorry,
that
I
I
don't want.
agree with them. Nor, but it also doesn't mean that I don't think that the pronoun stuff is stupid. That is kind of dumb, and like the gender, the narcissistic focus on like gender identity and stuff. I think is an issue amongst like primarily with like I guess what under 35 is the demographic, right?
Under 30, sorry, under 35 is the demographic for what?
For like a lot of that kind of like gendered pronoun focus. I don't know. Like some not insignificant portion of
I
like
think what you're referring to is millennials and Gen Z have a very large proportion of them that identify as queer. Is that correct? Is that what you're getting at?
yes.
Okay, so yeah, that is true, and that is just kind of a function of time, right? Like the more progress we make in terms of trans and gay rights, the more people are going to feel safe coming out and saying, "Yeah, I am gay, I am
I've heard
trans."
yeah. I've
Right?
heard that one. I don't
Yeah.
know if I've heard that and I don't know if I believe that necessarily, but I
Okay.
think that because if you pay attention to like I think that people are very susceptible to like media and academic institutions. I mean, especially places that have like authoritative power, like some kid will go to a school or a university. This is mainly where this happens in university settings. I think that the conservative talking heads often kind of miss the mark about this because they think that it's like starts at kindergartens, which is stupid. I think that it mainly is like a higher education type of thing because if you go take a sociology class, for instance, I mean, I that was like part of my prerequisites, and I had to sustain listening to a professor prattle on about like how Abraham Lincoln might have been gay or something. I mean, it's just this is the type of stuff that
I
happens
haven't
in.
heard that one. That is an interesting theory, though. It's an interest. Have you ever heard of Matt Pat, the game theory?
No, I haven't heard that.
No, you've never. Oh, because I was gonna make a joke. That's just a theory, a gay theory. It's okay.
But my point is that type of discussion happens there, and it's been actually happening for a long time. I think that it took a long time for that talk to leave the university setting because I remember it in like 2011, 2012 before like I think it started going mainstream around like 2015, 2016. Certainly after 2016, I think that stuff became very like mainstreamed,
Okay.
and but before that, it was relegated to like obscure corners of like academia.
So I want to back up for just a second because we've gone from now school age children to college, and this discussion kind of started with you saying your issue is with us pushing it on the children. So I'm just trying to figure out which
Because
direction we're gonna go.
I don't know. I mean, I think I go back and forth on it. I don't know if it's. I think that
Okay.
the majority of it happens in higher learning, but I think that there have been some isolated incidents which make me really kind of apprehensive towards anything. I mean, I think children should be left out of it. Full stop. That's
Uh,
my view.
how do you feel about isolated incidences of like Catholic priests doing things with kids, like with their altar boys?
I'm not a Catholic, so it
Well,
doesn't matter
I'm
to
not
me.
asking about that, but what I am getting at, and I'll just cut to the chase, I see a whole lot of like really panicky stuff. And to be clear, I have seen some weird stuff happening at drag shows with kids. I have seen that. So I'm not going to deny that that does not exist, okay? But I see a whole lot of panic about drag shows, about kids being groomed in like schools by their teachers. Uh, and very little do I hear panic from these same people about like actual cases of children being sexually assaulted and raped by Catholic priests. Policemen are actually another culprit. There are actually quite a few conservative politicians who've got quite the track record. So in my opinion, if you're serious about like somebody who wants to protect the children and protect the innocence and the safety of children, I feel like there are groups that are so much worse than drag queens and drag shows. Like there's just so much worse out there. I mean, what do you feel about that?
That may be, but what even you said so yourself, you've seen some questionable things. So I'm
Hmm?
just curious why that is even going on in the first place. Why why are there drag queens twerking in front of like a little kid or whatever? I
Are
don't
you
understand.
familiar with the restaurant Twin Peaks?
Twin Peaks, where's that?
Well, I live in Ohio, so maybe it's just an Ohio thing. But
You talking about the
think like
TV show?
no, no, no. Sorry. Think like well, it might be. I have no clue. But think of like lumberjack Hooters, right? For all intents and purposes, it's Hooters. So I was at this Twin Peaks restaurant, and there were kids there. There were kids everywhere. In fact, there was a baseball team there, like a youth baseball team, and these women are walking around in some pretty scanty clothes, like not to the point that I would say it's like grooming or anything like that, but it was pretty racy.
I
You
see
know,
your
like it
point. You're
was,
talking about like
yeah,
Hooters and places like
yeah.
that.
So
I don't.
you get where I'm going. Yeah.
Okay, I think that this point is often used to try to like say, "Oh, look, you're a hypocrite because you support this, but you don't support that." I just don't
Oh,
support either.
I never
So
said you,
that's
I never said you don't, I never said you support it.
no, no,
My,
no. I'm
go
saying
ahead.
that I've seen people bring up that argument, like, how come you guys never mention this or whatever? It's like, okay, well, I don't like either. It's simple.
But think about how much more often that happens. So like it at first when you first listen to it, you're correct. It sounds like a gotcha, like a whataboutism, right? Like, this thing's happening. Checkmate, Republican. But really, what I'm saying is, it's happening so much more often and in such a worse capacity that it does not actually make sense that you would focus on something that's just not even in the same league.
So your argument is that basically that the kind of the people that have like spearheaded the whole panic about this kind of stuff, I guess, are just doing it incorrectly. I guess I would agree.
Well, I'm not even saying incorrectly. I'm saying disingenuously. Like they don't actually care. Most of these people, they don't care.
No, of
I'm
course
not
they
saying
don't.
you're one. I'm not saying you're one of them. I'm saying the people who push this stuff. You're just a random chatter that showed up, and I'm not saying that to demean you or belittle you or anything. But you're just some guy. I'm not mad at you. I don't think that you're evil. Nothing like that. I do think that there are evil people pushing anti-trans rhetoric while blatantly ignoring the child abuse that takes place, not even just around them, but within their own circles. That is problematic to me. That's insane to me.
Yeah, but then what if somebody is consistent and they say, "Well, I don't approve of either of any of these things that are happening, regardless."
What did I just say to you? You don't support any of them, and I believe you. I believe that you are a genuine person. But what I'm saying is, the people who push this rhetoric, the people who focus in on the trans movement, are doing so. The I should say the people pushing the anti-trans rhetoric are doing so disingenuously because they know that there's so much worse happening in other areas, especially within their own circles, that they need to address. Like it's like the Jordan Peterson, right? Like don't clean your own room before you go around uh, criticizing the world, right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. But so, who, which are you like thinking about commentators or something? Who do you have in mind?
Sure. Let me think. I know that. Well, first of all, I want to say again, the Catholic Church is a terrible, terrible perpetrator of crime of sex crimes against children. I think the number was like 20. You know, I'll be conservative in my estimate. I believe the figure was like 10% in what country was it? I got to pull up the study again. I'm gonna say 10% in Italy. I could be wrong on the country, but there was a news report that I saw about that of like 10% of the Catholic priests in a country are thought to either have directly or indirectly contributed to child sexual abuse. That is an insane figure. Like that, and so when you tell me as a that you're like a Christian or a Catholic or whatever, and you are against the trans movement because they're quote unquote grooming kids, I just can't take you seriously because my
You
friend,
just permanently
glass
banned
house and all
Alec
that, right?
Gunter?
Like, come on.
Oh, okay. But then you could still, if you wanted to, you could still just tie the Catholic priest thing to homosexuality. Then you could say that this is consistent with homosexual behavior, where they like molest little kids and stuff. You could make. I mean, if you wanted to, you could take that angle.
I guess you could if you wanted to be even more disingenuous about it, because there's no proof that there's no evidence that people who molest children even have a preference for one sex or the other.
I think that there's probably more evidence linking it to that than there would be linking it to the fact that they're a Catholic priest. I'm not sure how the.
I disagree with you because the proportion of Catholic priests who engage in this activity do so at it's much higher than the proportion of gay people who engage in it statistically, like far and away higher.
What gender are the majority of convicted pedophiles?
They're male. They're men, I suppose, if you're speaking about gender.
Are they straight?
Like I said, I don't know the exact. Well, actually, I think most of them are straight now that I think about it. But even if we were to assume that it's 50-50, they don't care what the sex of the child is. Research shows that they will molest both boys and girls because it's about power. It's not about, uh, it's not even necessarily about being attracted to the physical being of the child. It's just that there is a child in front of you. This child doesn't know any better, and you can extract a lot from them because you have so much power over them. That's the draw. Does that make sense? Like that's what research shows.
Okay, I'm following your argument, but
Right.
I think that it's more of a. I mean, there's certain common denominators here. For instance, males, right? And so when I look at some of this stuff, and this is something that a lot of what people get what is it? They get labeled as TERFs for saying this, but I
Okay.
think that there's some truth to this because I think that it is kind of like an aggressive male problem. For instance, if you look at the trans women, right, the MTFs, they often are the ones who have they're often videotaped or they're on video doing like public freakouts or assaulting people at rallies and stuff, and seem to have a higher rate of aggression and violence than say female to males. And so I think when you look at all this stuff across the board, this is just an example of violent male behavior.
But even if I were to lend you that, it's like the you definitely do see it more from trans women, and what you keep bringing up is videos, which is optics, right? Like that's just isolated incidents, and I think that these videos are pushed along and they make the rounds, and then a new video pops up and that one makes the rounds, but there's no statistics that demonstrate that trans women are any more aggressive or violent, as at least as far as I know, than cis women. Like I just don't know if that data exists, and until it does, I wouldn't stake any policy or thoughts or beliefs on that.
Well, there's a online news outlet called Redux. I think it's spelled with two X's, maybe I'm not sure, but I think it's called Redux, and they kind of catalog all these like violent male perpetrators and stuff and such that are doing it under the guise of being trans and stuff. So I mean, I think that a lot of that stuff is kind of suppressed in the media.
Well, right, but when people are aggressive like that or they commit crimes, they're committing a crime or being aggressive regarding whether they're a trans person or not, right? Like it's not the fact that they're trans is the problem. The problem is they're being aggressive.
Hmm. Yeah, and but if that's the case, then so I think that there needs to be some more research done on the topic of this type of behavior because it just happens to be what I mainly see it from. At least that's just my anecdotal experience.
Okay,
So I
it's
can't really give you like I can't be like the person who's like, well, statistically, 85. Like I don't know. I
sure.
just
I don't expect you to be. What I will ask you is, do you know the statistics of black crime in the United States as compared to
some.
white crime?
Oh, okay. The 1350 thing.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question then would be, if we're going with 1350, 13% of black people make up 13% of the population, and they commit 50% of the crime. I don't know if that's exactly right, but for the sake of this argument, we'll go with that, right? So, what does that say then? Should we study black people more? Like, is there something inherently biologically aggressive about black people? Is it like a, a cultural thing? Like, why is it that you know, uh, black people commit these crimes at a higher rate than white people? Because statistically, they do. That is a fact.
There's different answers to that question. I don't really know. You're
That's
gonna have.
fine.
I don't
That's
have
fine.
an opinion. I was only here to discuss the trans thing. I don't
Sure.
have an.
But this is an important parallel because you're saying that trans men, or sorry, trans women, have a higher rate of aggression than uh, other people. Let's just say other demographics,
That's
right?
just males in general, though, right?
Yes, you're correct. It is just males in general, which then I would ask, are men just naturally more aggressive than women? Like, are
Yeah.
natural born males? Do you
Yes.
think so? Why?
Yes. Yes. That's hormonal.
You think it's just inborn? Like men are just prone to be more aggressive, more violent, more angry, more emotionally unstable, and more prone to commit violence than women are?
As a general rule, like I'm not saying that every single guy is going to be like that 100% of the time, but
No,
I
no,
think that
but the trend, right?
if
The trend.
it's a it is a trend, and it is something that's hardwired into like human biology. I don't know if is this still considered a fact that we are biological creatures and that there are certain predictive patterns for humans. Is that like being thrown out of the window?
No, it's not being thrown out the window. But even with genetic predispositions, do you know what? Are you familiar with epigenetics?
I think epigenetics is fairly controversial, but the idea is that genes are not necessarily environmental factor, or no, I'm sorry, behavioral factors can alter genes or something. Is that it's kind of like a weird, it's a bunk science, that's what some people say.
I don't think it's bunk. This is the oldest time nature versus nurture argument, right? Like, let's say you have two identical twins, perfectly genetically identical. That's what it means to be an identical twin, and that's why we love identical twin studies, especially when they're separated at birth. So you have two identical twins, they're separated at birth, they're adopted out to different families. One is raised in, let's say that one is adopted by a billionaire, right? Uh, Bill Gates. He's adopted by Bill Gates, and he's raised by Bill Gates. And Bill Gates is a great dad, and he's, let's say he's married to somebody. I don't know if Bill Gates has a wife or not, but he's adopted by this Bill Gates guy. He grows up rich. He goes to a good college. He gets a good job, and he has a clean track record. Right now, let's say that the other twin is raised by trailer trash, right? Like a white. Some it doesn't have to be white, I guess, but that's sorry. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. Some guy that's in a he's raised in a trailer, and his dad is abusive to him, and he doesn't really give a shit about him, and he doesn't feed him, and all this bullshit. And this kid grows up like this. He drops out of high school at 16. He gets a job as like a McDonald's worker or whatever. Which one of these two is more likely to commit crime?
I'm assuming you think that the McDonald's worker is.
Well, which let me put it this way: which one is more likely to be arrested for a crime that they commit? Or I could put it another way: which one's more likely to commit violent acts of crime, statistically?
I would assume the one who is poorer.
Right. So you understand where I'm going with this, right? Like nature versus nurture. Like the way that you're raised has a lot to do with how you behave in a social setting. Probably
Well,
way more than genes do.
or you could just, yeah, I guess you could make the argument that the rich person could conceivably commit crimes at the same rate. They just don't get
Oh,
prosecuted for them.
I mean, absolutely. We have our O.J. Simpsons, right? Well, he did get prosecuted, but yes, you're correct that rich people commit crimes and get away with it, no doubt. But statistically, with the data that we have, um, you know, it does seem as though people of a lower economic disposition are more prone to commit uh, acts of violence, um, or even just like general crime, especially theft. You're not going to see no billionaire corporate elite sneaking into a gas station trying to steal a candy bar.
Yeah, but that's because corporate crimes are like more abstract and complicated versus something that's like direct. It's
And
that's more visceral crime.
sure, and I agree with your point there. There's, rich people are their own sack of shit. But what I'm telling you is, as far as violence, as far as blatant crimes and being incarcerated, arrested, incarcerated, jailed, etc., statistically speaking, it is undeniable that your economic disposition is the greatest predictor of whether or not you will commit crime, especially violent crime.
I don't take contention with that statement
Okay.
necessarily. No.
Okay. So then my point is nature versus nurture, right? So the nurture is very important, probably more so, way more so than your genetic predisposition for any particular behavior. Because and even just looking at it from a practical perspective, I don't like the idea that we're just robots predestined to behave a certain way. And I don't think that's your argument, but that's kind of where it leads, right? Like you're just programmed because of your genes, and so this is the way you're going to be, is the way you're going to be, is the way you're going to be, and there's nothing you can do about it except for maybe a couple of things, but it's just the way you're going to be. I don't like that, and I don't think that
Well,
that
we
holds
still
up in
have.
any scientific capacity.
I think that the thing is that we have, since we live in a society of laws and
We
social
do live in a
mores.
society.
Yes, we have social mores and we have laws and institutions that guide human behavior so that like we're not animals.
Mhm. Yes. So to circle back around, right? When we're talking about like inborn behaviors, I just don't buy that. Uh, I just don't buy that men are like naturally more aggressive than women. I just don't buy it. I think that it has a lot to do with how we're raised. I'm sure you'll agree that like men have been given the shaft as far as emotional support, right? We're told to suck it up. Uh, we often get the shaft when it comes to uh, being a provider, right? The man is expected to be the provider, and so he needs to shut up and take it and go out and make some money, and the woman will be the nurturing one, the emotional one who raises the kids, and she can cry and she can express her emotions any way she wants, especially because she has other women friends who will support her. But you go and try and break down and crying to your buddies at the bar and tell me how that goes for you. You know what I mean? Like, maybe you have a good group of friends, but most men will. I think this is getting better, but there certainly was a time when you couldn't do that without being called a bitch, right? Like a pussy.
I guess
And
I don't know.
my point being, that would discourage that sort of behavior, that sort of emotional outlet. So what are you left with, right? It's not manly to cry. It's not manly to just speak openly about your emotions. But what is manly is aggression, aggressive behavior, exerting control over people, violence, yelling, screaming, hitting, punching, kicking, whatever. Uh, Perhaps raping. You know, some people consider that manly. I think that that's horrific, but
No, I don't think anybody considers raping,
mm,
man.
you'd be surprised.
Who? Okay,
They don't openly
I would be surprised.
they
Yes,
don't
I
openly state that I think it's manly to rape people, but they certainly have a way of phrasing it. Point being, you're I think it's a pessimistic view of manliness and manhood and what it means to be a man to say, well, men are just born aggressive. We're just born to be huge pieces of shit who don't know how to get our act together and end up in jail because we end up violently stabbing somebody to death or some shit. I don't like that. And I think that's false.
well, I did no. I would agree that I don't buy that narrative. I'm also. I mean, like I said. Well, actually, I
Right.
didn't say this, but I'm not a feminist or anything. But I did use I brought up some of those examples because I think that they do hint at a certain truth, in that I do think that there is that component when it comes to a sort of popular perception of trans male to female behavior. I think that there is that biological component to it. I just don't see how I don't see how that can be refuted per se. I think that you can make the argument that men will behave somewhat differently because of the environment that they're raised in. But I think that at the end of the day, there are certain inalienable characteristics that men and women both have, and that there is a difference between us that cannot be tamed by our own intervention.
Well, I'm not arguing that there's a difference between men and women. I think there are fewer differences than most people think, but there is certainly a difference. I don't think that a somebody who was born female, if I and she were to, without any kind of hormonal help, weight train for let's say 5 years, odds are, I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn or anything, but I max out pretty heavy at the gym, right? I don't think that the vast overwhelming majority of women are going to be able to reach that goal, or that the weights that I've hit, without some kind of hormonal intervention,
I
right?
would argue that
So
even with steroids such as Anavar or whatever that women take when they compete in sports like powerlifting or bodybuilding or whatever, I mean, they're still even the most like gifted of them all, unless they're like a total genetic freak, is still not going to be at the
right, right.
same level as a man who's done all of those
Sure.
things.
So point being, we agree that men and women they do have some innate differences. I think that these differences are a lot more shallow and a lot fewer and farther between than most people, like your average person would think. I think that most of these different, like at least innate differences, I think that most differences are socially built in. That's my point. And when we talk about trans people, and especially these videos that you say that you bring up about them being violent towards old women, et cetera, et cetera, there are a few factors to take into consideration here. Like, let's just take one of the, like, I'll just make one up. Like, let's say you have a video of a trans woman punching an old lady and calling her a TERF, right? Just decks her. All right.
Yeah.
So you have two choices here. One, first of all, what that person did is bad, and I want to stress that, and that person should be arrested for assault. I don't want to make any excuses for what that person just did. They are responsible for their own behavior. But at the same time, if, as you say, you're seeing a pattern of this behavior, instead of just simplifying it down to, oh, well, it's just male genetics, or these crazy trans people just don't know how to control themselves, well, you're going down a slippery slope there, my friend, because why can I not say the same about black people then? Right? Because they clearly have higher rates of violent crimes, as racists
Mm,
love to point out.
I
So,
think racism as it developed throughout history I think it's a bit different. It's a different topic. I don't think it's comparable necessarily.
why not?
Because racism that's like an abstract term. Like, it depends on what we're talking about. But let's say you brought up black people, and
Mhm.
then you look at the transatlantic slave trade and such. I mean, these are not things that I think necessarily, like, it was not, what do you call it? Like, we were not destined to necessarily do those. Slavery was not necessarily even based around the understanding of race, but I guess in the North American context, it did evolve into this kind of biological sort of conception about race, right? But then you look at it around the world, it was not always necessary. Like, slavery wasn't always necessarily like a racial thing, right? So,
No, but
okay.
but it wasn't. It was very much a racial thing in America. Yes,
Right.
right,
But that's kind of like a unique sort of quirk about that particular uh, flavor of slavery, right?
of course. And my point is, with that unique flavor of slavery came a unique flavor of disenfranchisement for Black people that exists, even that we still see, uh, shrapnel from. We still see leftovers, residue, whatever.
Yeah, but
And
black people, they don't make the choice. They don't say, I'm gonna, like, they are born black. The trans people are not born trans. So some people will say that these people make that argument. I just don't see it. I think that that's a choice that somebody makes. They say, okay, I'm a man in a woman, or I'm sorry, I'm a woman in a man's body, so I'm gonna make the choice to alter myself physically. I don't think that's not the same as somebody who's born black.
let me ask you this: do you think it is a okay? Let me ask you this: do you prefer pizza or hot dogs?
Okay, pizza.
Sure. Did you choose to prefer pizza over hot dogs, or is that just a thing that happens in your head?
I think I probably chose that. I don't know, but
Well,
okay,
you
just
did.
make your argument then.
No, well, I'm serious though, because in in my opinion, like if you have a preference for one food over the other, that's not something that you chose to have a preference for. You can train yourself, certainly, like you can be socially influenced, because somebody from China probably is not going to say that pizza is their favorite food, of course. So that's socially influenced, right? Um, but my point is, you didn't choose that preference consciously. That's just something that that based on how pizza versus hot dogs taste, you decided you like pizza better. Uh, and the decision that you like pizza better came from an innate drive, an innate force that you can't control, that tells you, hey, my body reacts to this one better, so that's the one that I like, right? And you didn't choose
Okay.
that.
Okay. I think this is a bit different though, because we're talking about something that is what I mean, medically altering yourself. I think there's a lot more going on psychologically than food preference, right?
Well,
And
I mean, but on a base level, I think it's the same, because what I'm saying is there's an innate drive for somebody who was born male to wants to grow up with a feminine woman's body. And they didn't pick that drive. That's just something that has always existed ever since they saw women and they saw men and they decided, hey, I want to grow up and look like that one, and then points at the woman.
I
Why?
think
I
that
don't fucking know. I love being a man, but hey, go
right,
freak for
but I
that.
think that
Hey, that's just me.
I think that the difference is that there's now an entire medical industry that can profit off of those types of desires. And I think that people are being encouraged to do things that might not necessarily be the best thing for them, medically speaking. I think
Okay.
that an extreme minority might benefit from something like that. But, like, I think
they're being far too liberal with how they're prescribing certain hormones and stuff. I mean, and now the conversation has drifted into involving minors. I mean, some people are like, I remember that several years ago it was not controversial to say I don't think anybody under 18 should be given hormone blockers, but now it's like controversial. Now there's an argument and it's been politicized where if you say, hey, I don't think that minors should be given hormone blockers, now you're considered a right wing fanatic, whereas did not used to be that way. So I think that the culture is drifting in a certain direction where it's like, okay, you have to agree with this or you're this undesirable element according to like mainstream culture.
That's kind of how progress works, though, right? Like with time, I know that it's a lot more contentious because there's a medication that is often involved, aka usually puberty blockers is the one that everyone likes to point at because that's the one that's given the youngest. But there are a few things. Oh man, where do I go with this conversation? I could go so many different directions. Um, Let me start with this. Are you aware with the fact that children are privy to differences in gender before they're even 2 years old? Like they know what a boy is versus what a girl is. Does that track with you?
Sure.
Okay. So by the time they reach 4, and usually way before that, children identify with the the gender, usually the gender that they were assigned, but it can be the other one, the opposite one, right? Uh, there are rare cases where it's neither, but that's a whole other conversation. For all intents and purposes, we'll go with the male female thing, boy girl. So there are the vast majority of people will socially fall into the category of the gender that they were assigned, and there are a small number, 1%, and it is growing as acceptance for trans people grows, that will want to fall into the other category. They'll say, I actually like, I feel like I am represented better by girls. I feel like I fit better with girls. I feel like the social standards that are set for girls fit me better, even though I was born and I'm called a boy currently, right? Like that's by four
Or,
years old.
so why do you say it's progress? Why does that necessarily have to be a progress? Why can't it be regression, for example? Why do you think that um, as time goes on we progress, whatever that means? Why can't we regress? For instance, why are we like, why is that how your mind goes when you
Well,
hear something like that?
we certainly can regress, which is shown by, to go back to an earlier point, Ron DeSantis in Florida, where he's actually using many of certain mustachioed fellows' favorite tactics during a certain World War II, whereby he
He's
is,
Hitler.
yes, I'm serious. He is literally making lists of like, I believe he's making a list and checking it twice of, trans people in college. I could be wrong on that, or like their political views in college is what it was. And he's also, I believe, I haven't read the latest legislation, but uh, some kind of kidnapping going on with trans kids. Oh yeah, no, he's saying that like if children are at risk, quote unquote, at risk of gender affirming care, that they can just be taken from their parents. And I think that's insane.
I Well, what if it's a case of child abuse or something? I'm not a Ron DeSantis fan, but like that on its own doesn't tell me much.
He's saying if you're at risk of gender affirming care, which is uh, it's just a broad umbrella term for saying that a trans kid is valid, and also like the treatment that goes along with it, which could be puberty blockers, which could be hormones when they hit 16. It could not be. The overall term for it is gender affirming care, which just implies we're recognizing this person is the gender that they say they are.
Oh, okay. So your issue is that the bill is just too broad. Okay. Yeah, I guess that would make sense because I think that the first part of it sounds okay, but then the other one is kind of iffy because it's like that could be like a violation of people's civil liberties. But if the first half is just okay, we're not going to give hormones to people under 18. I think that's okay. I don't have an issue with that.
Say that. Sorry, say that one more time. The last part. You're okay with which part?
Of not giving minors access to hormones or anything like that.
So the research that we have though on the subject says otherwise. Like the medical standards that are supported by the American Psychiatric Association, the American Nurses Association, even in Britain they have the Royal. Uh, the Royal Psychiatric Association, and they all support gender affirming care. So like, why do these random conservative pundits and politicians think that they have more medical knowledge to make these decisions than doctors who have studied this for years, decades, some of them?
Yeah, but I think that in this particular example, you're bringing up institutions as if they're like infallible, like, oh, we can just simply take their word as gospel. But
Well, tell me who's more infallible, a medical institution or a politician, or tell me who's more fallible.
the medical institution would invariably be more trustworthy. But
Yes.
you okay, but that doesn't mean that they are trustworthy. It's just we're talking about sliding scales here because, for instance, when you talk about medical institutions being trustworthy, all you have to do is look at their track record, like the history of what they've said was fine, and then it turns out, well, it's not fine, and then they change what they say. So we could be in a situation now where they say one thing about that, and then in a couple of years, when it falls out of fashion, they'll change their mind.
Well, there is something to be said for the medical industry changing over time. But if you look back, one big thing that people love to bring up is the lobotomies that they did on women back. Was it the 40s, 50s? I think as late as the 60s. They would do lobotomies on women for quote unquote hysteria. They would just diagnose women with hysteria and say, "Yeah, your wife is broken. We will fix her by removing her brain," and then like she's just a vegetable uh, for the husband to abuse for the rest of her basically non-existent life. And it's terrible. It's horrible. And the medical industry supported that. No, I shouldn't say the medical industry. I'd have to look more into specifically who supported that. But that was regularly practiced because their measure for the outcome was, has the behavior gone away, right? That was all they were looking at. And what was the behavior to them? It was hysteria. And hysteria back then was just, you're a woman and you're not listening to the man who owns you. So that was very bad. All right. These days, the standard that we use is the satisfaction of the person who underwent the procedure. And overwhelmingly, and actually even more than things like knee replacements, trans people are extraordinarily happy, like overwhelmingly, 99% or more with their procedures, with their
Well, on
treatment from medicine.
the people who vocalize their dissatisfaction are often smeared. I mean, like the detransitioners and stuff are getting, the, getting assaulted or getting, an avalanche of hate, for example. Like, so I don't know if we can say that.
Is there
I
an
mean,
example of? I see. Here's the thing. I think that detransitioners are an important population to study and to recognize. And most detransitioners actually, at least from the reports that I've seen, support the trans community and even consider themselves a part of the trans community still because they transition not only once but twice. They transitioned twice because they went from the first gender that they were assigned to the opposite gender and then back to the original gender. That's two transitions. So I
mhm.
know that there are some of these detransitioners coming out saying that, because it didn't work for them, it won't work for anybody and it's evil and blah, blah, blah. But what I'll tell you is that for every one detransitioner, there's at least 100 happy trans people. So for every one detransitioner you talk to, you need to talk to 100 trans people who did not detransition in order to get an accurate reading of the satisfaction. And that's what they did. That's what these studies did. They
Well,
that's precisely what they did.
even if that's the case, then we're still talking about a not insignificant portion of people. I mean, if it's even, I don't know if it's actually one for every 100, but let's say that even if that were the case, I mean, that's still, mathematically, you're going to eventually over time that population's going to grow, and it's going to,
That's
you're going
fewer.
to have
That's
to.
that's fewer than the number of people who regret their knee surgery. Should we stop doing knee replacement surgery? Should we stop that?
No, I don't think so. No,
Okay,
but I
so
think,
then you understand then why you cannot use that as a basis of your argument for taking these treatments away from trans people, correct?
I don't think that okay, the satisfaction part, I don't think is the only component, like,
No,
or
it's far from the only component, but it's important. It's important, right? Because if at the end of the day, what's important is that these people are living to, have the best quality of life possible.
well, they can have that. They don't necessarily need to be given hormone blockers if they're minors. I mean, that
They
stuff
aren't
does like
all are. They aren't all are, but that's why we have doctors who study this and assess these people to decide this child needs hormone blockers or else they are going to be at risk of depression, anxiety, or even suicide. because they don't want the body that they were that biology predestined for them.
Well, I think the issue is that it's going to do irreparable harm. So I mean, we could even see an uptick in people who detransition.
Puberty also does irreparable harm.
No, puberty is a natural
Well, be
wave
careful with that
of
word natural, because there are a lot of natural things that do a whole lot of damage. A lot of
puberty is just one
damage.
of those things that every human being goes through. It's not. I don't know why we have to start altering that. That's
Okay, it used to be that one of those things that every human being went through was disease at the ripe old age of 23, and then they died. That was just a normal part of biology. That was just nature working, baby. And that was if you're
well.
lucky.
Again, though, it's like this is not like a. It's not about like what do you call it? Like I'm not bringing morality into this. I'm just saying that there are certain things that are going to
I didn't bring
happen when you
morality.
start. When you what?
I didn't bring morality into it.
No, I'm saying I didn't. I'm
Oh,
not doing
okay,
that.
okay.
I'm just saying that there's going to be certain consequences of these actions that
Okay.
people for some reason are downplaying or just haven't been able to come to terms with. And so I think that
Like what?
for instance, they bring up the detransition. I think because I think that there is going to be eventually there's going to be when this fervor subsides publicly, like as like a popular phenomenon, I think that you're going to see an uptick of people who start to kind of maybe whatever the
And
detransition or
what are you basing this prediction on?
I'm taking a stab in the dark. I don't know if that I don't know
Yeah,
if that's
yes,
gonna
but you're absolutely correct when you say that, because an educated guess, a hypothesis that actually tracks with what we're seeing with the data, indicates the opposite. That these trans people are not only going to be happier as time goes on, as the procedures get better and our diagnostics get better, but there are going to be more of them.
I would like
Which by the way,
I don't know how are these studies conducted? Like how many people are they asking these questions and so on and so forth?
well, it varies with the study, but you would have to pull up a specific one and analyze its procedures. But if you trust the institutions that do studies on everything else, like cancer, knee replacements, like we brought up,
I don't
heart
necessarily
disease,
trust them on
that
every topic though. That's the thing.
well,
So it's not just
but
the
then
trans
are
stuff.
you personally, though, my friend, are you personally literate in reading the methodology of these studies and deciding this one is invalid? Are you educated to do that? Which
I
you might
am
be. You might be.
educated enough. I am educated enough to read through studies when it comes to that. I would
Do you
imagine.
have any formal training when it comes to that? Like college, like I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying it helps, like a college degree.
I work in the medical industry,
Oh, do you? I do too. I'm a nurse. What do you work as?
X-ray technician.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So I think we got some common ground. That's good. That's nice. So during your schooling as an X-ray technician, and granted, I have no clue what that's like. Okay, did you have any formal training reading these studies?
On this particular topic, no, but
No,
I
no,
could
but any
easily read a
studies, but any
I
studies,
could
any
easily
studies,
read a study. Yeah, of
any
course.
study. Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So you had to do like homework on them, and uh, understand the processes by which the researchers drew their conclusions
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah. Well, when you go
all
to
that good
school,
stuff.
you do read studies and not just medical ones. So you are trained in order to be able to sniff out bullshit if you take like statistics or
Exactly.
whatever.
So my question is, if that is the case, have you pulled up these studies and read through them and sniffed out the bullshit?
On the trans thing, no.
Okay. So it seems like you are kind of
We could do a part two. Do you want me to do that? I can go read some studies and then I can come back and say, aha, so look at this. I can do that if you
Oh,
want.
I mean, absolutely, we could do that if you'd like. If you have to get going, don't let me keep you. But because I'm
Well,
having a good
I
time.
didn't expect it to take this long. I actually do have to get going, but we
Oh
could.
no.
You know what? We could easily set that up if you want to do something. This is like more of like on a whim. I mean, yeah. If you want to introduce things like statistics and all this stuff, we can easily do that.
Yeah. You know what? That's fair. I kind of pulled you in here, and you graciously accepted, and I don't want to put you on the spot or anything. So take as much time as you need. If you feel like you need to go look at some of this stuff and study up and to build your case, I absolutely encourage that. Um, but while you're doing it, I would also encourage you to keep an open mind. Don't try not to do this specifically for the purpose of building a case against trans people. Try to just look at these studies and say, yeah, this was good methodology, this was not, etc. Do you think that's
I,
fair?
I think I could be fair and assess whatever studies I bring up in an argument. But it's clear that I do take a certain stance on this topic. But I'm not
Of
just going
course.
to look for evidence. I'm not just going to fire the arrow first and then the target comes second. Like I'm going to try to be as objective as possible. But yes, I do have a bias.
Well, we all have biases. I'm biased in favor of trans people, and I'm fine with recognizing that. So,
Okay, great. Sounds good. Well, I'm in your Discord, so I'll message you and maybe we can set something up in the next few weeks or so.
okay, that sounds great. You just let me know whenever you got time. I'm these days I'm not streaming that often. It's usually only on Saturdays, but we can work out a day that works better for you if you need to. But yeah, take as much time as you need. Let me know if you'd like, if and when you'd like to come on again. I thought this was a good discussion. I thought we came across some good points there. So I
I
enjoyed it.
agree. I thought it was a good discussion. Sometimes you were wrong, and sometimes I was right, and that's how these things go. And I'll shoot you a message, and we'll discuss setting something up.
All right, sure thing, man. Hey, you have a great night. Thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you. I wasn't lying. I did enjoy that conversation. It's been a while. It's been a minute. Sometimes you were wrong and sometimes I was right. Yeah, I was this close to saying something, but I was like, you know what? Let's not burn any bridges. We'll give them it. We'll let them have it. If you're watching this on YouTube, thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you want to see more. Hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload. You can join my channel membership at youtube.com/AlecGunther/TTV/join for only 99 cents a month. That's less than the price of a blowjob from your mom. You can be part of the channel membership program and you will get early access content as well as a sweet badge next to your name and exclusive emojis in the comments that nobody else gets. Thank you again, and I will see you all in the next video.